Right, well, welcome back, everybody. Sorry for the prolonged adjournment there. Time sort of got away on us all. So we're moving now into deliberation phase. I've just, actually, Andrew Brown, you have your hand up. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I do, Chair, actually. I've sat through this morning quite quietly, but with great interest. But look, I'd just like to remind us all, I hope it's appropriate, that we're dealing with a strategy that informs our plans as in the next long-term plan and beyond. And we shouldn't get lost in the detail. And quite frankly, even the third bridge is a detail. The Te Awamutu bypass is a detail. What we need to be looking at is, does the strategy allow us to make a plan that is sensible when we are doing our next long-term plan? It's not about whether it's including a third bridge. It's about whether it's the strategic direction going forward is catered for by this plan. And I'd like to say, I think Kirsty and Brian and their teams have done a fabulous job on this. It's exactly what we need. The other comment I've got to make is we're all struggling to get our heads around what transportation, particularly for private individuals, is going to look like, perhaps in a shorter space of time as 5 or 10 years. If we're going to meet our Paris Accord obligations, it's likely to be pretty different to what it is now. Yeah, so that's just my start of a 10. I'll have more comments to make later, I have no doubt. Thanks.
Yeah, look, well put, Andrew. We do have to remind ourselves that this is a very high-level document, and it is something that has gone through a pretty robust process. So what I propose we do then is we turn our minds then to page 3, 8, 6 and 5, and we will go through our submissions sort of by topic there, as we do when we deal with annual plan and actually long-term plan responses to submissions. I'm not too concerned about whether people think that there might be slight typographical errors. I'm sure those will be picked up in the fullness of time, but I'm more concerned about whether we're comfortable with the general flavour of the responses that we are giving to people who've taken the effort to submit to us. And in many instances, we've actually accommodated their suggestions around changes to our draft strategy, and that, dare I say, has been acknowledged by a number of submitters today, to our credit. So starting therefore with the submissions by topic and recommendations. The first one is the climate change and environment topic. There on page, it's 2 of that annexure, but 387. I have no issues with those ones, and perhaps I just flick through, I say the numbers, and then we keep going. And if you've got an issue with something of any significance, please raise your hand. But bearing in mind, we're not here to rewrite and do our staff's job. We are just here to acknowledge and endorse the responses where we think they're appropriate. So page 2 and 3.
Susan, yeah, that's right. Just on that climate change thing, like the comment is that Council recognise the importance of that emissions reduction plan. So I'm just wondering if that's strong enough, because I mean, it is really important to me. This is probably going to be, you know, a broken record from me while we discuss this. And I did raise it when the strategy came to us, you know, before it was released, that, you know, we need some targets in there, some hard targets. So I'd just like to know from staff, what is the plan? Like, if we adopt this strategy today, when will those targets get put in? You know, we're expecting like this, the government's discussion documents open now, and yeah, we're likely to hear in the next few months about those harder targets. So is there a process where we can get those targets put into the strategy, or is this something that's got to happen later on? Yeah, or is there the opportunity to amend it at a future time that isn't too far away?
Great question, Claire. Rachel is ready and waiting to answer that.
Great.
Thank you, Councillor Clare. We've followed the lead of knowing that the emissions reduction plan is coming our way. We've also been consistent with the Regional Land Transport Plan and the target in there at the moment. We propose to be consistent with the Regional Land Transport Plan, and that is to reduce carbon emissions by 25% by 2030, on the path to net carbon zero by 2050, preempting that things were coming our way, and following that lead with the Regional Land Transport Plan as well. So we're not expecting that we would adapt the transport strategy per se to reflect that, but we also have an environment strategy coming up as well. That could be an avenue to look at that as well.
Okay, no, that's really great. And I think there's been a really strong message coming through that we need to be consistent with our regional partners as well, and all these other documents that are being worked on too. So that's a great, it's great to know that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. Andrew, have you still got your hand up from last time? Because I can actually see you guys now. That's quite remarkable.
Yeah, sorry, I'll put it down.
Excellent. No, that's right. I hate to be missing you. Roger.
Yeah, just a couple of small, and these are just suggestions to perhaps improve the responses that we make to our submitters. One was on the submitter that talked about the removal of trees through developments, and I thought it was relevant to mention the council policy or strategy of ensuring that all of our villages have got planting of trees within new subdivisions, so we're actually mitigating that that removal of those trees. And the other one is in terms of the change to electric vehicles, which occurred on a number of submissions, that to mention that it's actually the international manufacturers that are actually stopping manufacturing fossil fuel vehicles, a number of them by 2040, and that the electric vehicles are the only ones that are commercial available than other fuels. So it just kind of acknowledges some of the points that they made in their submission.
Excellent, great, thank you. Lou?
I agree with exactly what Andrew was saying a little earlier, but I'd just like to say with the climate change and environment, I think we have to coordinate and cooperate with all our local territorial authorities and our regional councils. We cannot formulate policy on our own. We would not be able to sustain that. So I think we've got to have a combined approach to this, because we're still looking at something that's quite nebulous, because we've had nothing yet from central government that is accurate and quantifies anything that we need. So I think that we need to look at this, and perhaps within this strategy, just put in the fact that we do this collectively, work in a collective spirit.
Okay, thank you. So are we all going to turn our minds into the specific responses on page 387? Page 388. As I say, yell out if there's a concern you have in respect of any of these. 389, 390, 391, 392, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 400, 402, 403, 404 and 405, 406, 407. On 408 here, I just pointed out to staff that the response to Tim Gudsell, the submitter Tim Gudsell, was slightly contradictory. The recommendation that council agrees with the submitter and will update the top document accordingly as per recommendation. No changes to the transport strategy. Didn't really make much sense. So I flicked it onto Joe. They'll wordsmith that so it actually makes sense.
Yeah,
Roger.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, you quickly went through the page numbers there. I thought we were going through section. So are we now talking about cycling and walking section, or have you gone past that?
Yeah, I have. I mean, the titles are on the top of the pages. I'm just mindful, Roger, that we have the commencement of our annual PAN hearing later this afternoon, and I just don't want to put our submitters to inconvenience of waiting. That's all. We have a time frame that we have allocated for this, and I accept that we could spend weeks and weeks and weeks listening to each other's points of view on things, but the reality is that we have a certain time frame to work within. So my apologies for that, but that's the reality.
Well, that actually concerns me, that we're being cut short in our consideration.
Do you have a
this
consideration in terms of
strategy.
the cycling and walking issue as a
it's
totality?
actually, well, there were a number. One was the number of submitters that referred to the sewer bridge, and the response that actually originally it was considered and it was dismissed. But to be honest, that was something like 10 plus years ago.
Oh,
And perhaps the situation is worthy of another review to see if those factors are still relevant in the addition of the conversion or the application of making that sewer bridge a walking and cycling bridge. I think it's worthy of another consideration.
I think that Brian Hudson, are you out there in Zoom land and can address us with some facts around that, please?
Yes, I am. Thanks, Madam Chair. So it wasn't 10 years ago that it was thought about. Obviously, the sewer bridge was replaced less than 5 years ago now. So it was considered at that time, and the difficulties of access and the environment and the bridge loading to make it suitable for pedestrians and cyclists were sort of looked into at that time. Certainly my advice to council along the way has been there are likely to be other places where a pedestrian cycling bridge would be in a better location, a better environment and better value for money. And but certainly take the point of Councillor Brown earlier on, this strategy should not be looking to decide where a pedestrian bridge goes, just that we have the appropriate strategy to improve walking and cycling for our towns.
Thank you, Brian. Now, Claire and Andrew both have their hands up.
I was anticipating the public transport one, Madam Chair, so that's all. You were going pretty fast, so I don't know.
Okay, going like Chris Lightning. Andrew Brown, did you have a question or are you anticipating as well?
No, not a question. I just wanted to make the point that Brian did at the end, that this is not a topic for this strategy at all. That is something to go in to the next long-term plan if councillors wish for that to be the case. This is about strategy, not detail. And on that point, I'd just like to say I read your email, Roger, and I totally admire your capacity for detail and hard work, but it's not appropriate for this forum. You know, you should be getting a job with council to write the policy, not this is not governance. Sorry, a bit of a bugbear.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that, but I thought we were talking about our responses to the submitters. And in fact, we are given the responsibility of reviewing their submissions and coming back to them with a comment that recognises perhaps the validity of their submissions. I mean, okay, we can just ignore their submissions and say, oh, well, hey, we don't think that they're important. I just think that they are important and that we should respond to them and recognise the points that they've raised and give them the privilege of our reasonableness of response. I think
I'll interrupt you there for a minute, Roger. I think we have and we are. We're just not delving into granular detail that's required at this level in terms of it being response to a strategy. And some of these items are repetitious. So there's no point in reinventing the wheel when it comes to those responses. So I guess, you know, there are odd ones, such as the one I've raised where it actually is contradictory. For some reason, it didn't make any sense. So staff are quite prepared to go and change that. We're not here to litigate the finer points of whether a cycling bridge should be put over the sewer that crosses the road, crosses the river, and when that last happened and why it didn't happen and when it's going to be reviewed again. That's a level of granular detail that's not required at this level. Okay. So with that said, we are back to page 408. Again, yell out if you have anything that's glaringly wrong in the responses. 409, 410, 411. I raised there, and on 412, I raised there the suggestion that Pirongia Ward Committee, I see that they verbally submitted, and I wondered whether they required a written response. I thought it was only appropriate that they did get a written response, and Joe is taking care of that one. So moving on then into the growth and congestion topic, page 413, 414, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. On page 419, I've suggested that our response to the Timutu Community Board could also include work around car parking studies done in Timutu, because the staff response related solely to the Cambridge. And I felt, given it's a community board that's raised that issue, it's only appropriate we tailor-make their response to their specific concerns, especially seeing as work was done in that space quite comprehensively.
We're on parking now.
Yep.
Look,
Oh, sorry, parking
I just
now.
have one suggestion there, and it was in response to the request to consider parking for coaches. And what I would recommend there is, because there is a big increase in visitor numbers to Cambridge and hopefully TA when we open TROI, but we have a parking review that's supposedly I'd like to see that being committed to in 2023, and that parking view include parking for coaches, and then that's a positive response to that submitter.
Can you tell me which submitter that was in particular?
I think it was the Destination Cambridge submission.
Again, that's probably a topic that you're conflicted on, Roger, so it might be inappropriate for you to raise it at this point.
Okay.
So page 420, I wondered perhaps if we could tailor-make a little bit of a response there to the Timutu Community Board in terms of their submission around why the event centre is not, the lot out there isn't an appropriate place for a car park. They've often raised that with council. I think they're owed quite a more detailed reply than the bog standard that we have raised to people. So moving on then to public transport, bus section 421, 422.
Madam Chair, that's my yeah. So the response about connecting rural villages with public transport, but right now low demand means those services are not economically viable. I'm just wondering, I don't think they ever will be. So I wondered whether or not it could be the response changed to say that perhaps non-commercial options might be explored more. You know, like I do admire those volunteer sort of shuttle buses and things, and also doing more for carpooling and ride sharing would also help our communities as well. There's been a request for ride share park and ride things, and also whether we could connect with the more southern communities like Otorohanga and Tikawiti, who probably are coming up through Tuamutu and then like Pirongia and Ngahanapuri, whether or not there's scope there, to have people sharing rides or carpooling, and is there any capacity for staff to maybe just put a few words in there about those options?
Okay. Yeah, Rachel, I think is going to answer that.
Councillor Clare. Yes, there is some work also going on at the region to look at, and there's a couple of actions in the regional land transport plan, working with our regional partners to look at what transport services that could be provided for rural communities, such as on-demand services, extending total mobility services, shuttle type services. So absolutely could be something that down the line could be working with rural networks to encourage services such as what you've suggested. Thank you.
Yeah, well, Rachel, I'd be really happy if you just put a few words like that, that we're aware that that land transport work, the regional council is going to be looking at this, and we hope that rural communities will be able to engage on it or something. Just so, because that just gives people who are interested in it, the key which will be the agency that will be leading that, you know, and then they'll know to be watching out for something from the regional council. That's all.
Thank you. Great point, Claire. Great point. Roger?
Yeah, I'd like to support that comment. I think the work that the Regional Council are currently doing at looking at the funding model and the provision model could have impact on the provision of passenger transport. And I think a comment regarding that, but also the other factor that comes from the Regional Council's recent report was the move to 100% electric vehicle in terms of their passenger fleet. And that, plus perhaps the development, as Council have indicated, of an electric charging facility to enable electric passenger transport, could also influence provision. And I think some comment in terms of the response regarding that could be beneficial.
Did you hear all of that, team? Excellent, fantastic. Thank you. So I'm kind of lost myself here. We're about 423, I think. 424, 425, 426, 427, and takes us 28 and before we hit the railways. Okay, well, moving on then with the rail, freight and passenger, 429, 30, 31. Oh, then we're onto the river crossings, Cambridge,
Can we just
31.
look back on that rail? And again, I think a point to enhance the response to the submitters was the recent comment within the regional transportation plan that they see that rail as frequent transport to the region's provision alternative is not within their foreseeable plan and outside of our window to 2050. So it's unlikely to, as a passenger service, be relevant. Yep.
Fantastic. Got that. So then moving on to page 431, the river crossings in Cambridge, 432, 433, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40.
May I just make comment on the standard response? And I totally agree, there is a standard response because there are a lot of submitters that have actually responded to that. And I notice in terms of that response, the first two paragraphs are fine. The third paragraph, where it actually indicates the staff response, mentions up to 70 million and 46 per year. Now, I'm assuming that the brief for the third bridge strategic business case will assess possible sites for the bridge, that the overall project cost will be dependent on where the bridge will be sited and its associated engineering costs, the design of the bridge with its manufacturing and construction costs, the purchase, protection of the roading.
Can I interrupt you there, Roger? I'm trying to understand where you're going with this.
Well, the point is, I think there are so many variables within that any comment in that response regarding total cost of the project or the cost per ratepayer cannot be made because it's too much of a variable. I think that any reference to projected cost and implication to ratepayer should actually be removed from that response.
I'm personally quite comfortable with it, but Andrew Brown is beaming in through the powers of technology. Do you have something to say, Andrew?
Yeah, I acknowledge what Roger's saying about the cost being certainly at the very most a ballpark figure, but with construction costs as they are, it's very unlikely to end up lower. And I think our submitters need to understand what the potential implications are. So, you know, I'm with you. I'm quite comfortable.
Yeah, Thank you, Andrew. I think, yeah, you're right. There needs to be a clear understanding of what the financial ramifications of that would be. And it's probably not a discussion we've probably conveyed very well with our communities, perhaps leading up to this. But nevertheless, those are the numbers as we see them today. And yes, you're right. It seems wildly unlikely that it's going to get any cheaper. So, Claire, did you have something you wanted to add there?
Oh, well, I was agreeing too. I do think it is appropriate to have a ballpark figure in there, because I think it's a reality check for people that are requesting a solution to a problem, and there might be other solutions. For instance, I'm gobsmacked that no one has been asking, when there's an alternative route that is only 400 metres longer than the high level bridge, why there isn't more people using that lower level bridge, and what could be done to get more traffic on that one, because there's an alternative to the congestion as far as I'm aware, but it's not being taken up, and that would have no impact on rates, and it would be a long-term solution. Yeah, so I'm happy for those figures to be left in there.
Thanks, Claire. I guess the other point I would like to make, and perhaps if there is an alteration made to that, it would be to stress that those costs wouldn't be borne just by Cambridge ratepayers. It's across the entire district, which puts quite a different shine on things, I'm sure, for people in Pirongia who are probably unlikely to use the bridge very regularly. So,
Madam Chair, may I make a request then that the cost breakdown for that is shared with me?
Pardon?
I'd like to see the cost breakdown of that projected 70 million, please, because somebody's got that cost from somewhere.
I'm sure they'll be able to find it, Roger, but at the moment we'll turn our minds to the strategy before us.
Through you, Madam Chair, yeah. I doubt whether there has been a cost breakdown done. These figures are really a wet finger in the wind, if you like, and you only have to look at what the most recent cost for the Hamilton crossing is to give you an indication, and that's over 100 million. So it's big figures, and this is an indication. If it was $70 million, and that I agree is a light estimate, that's the impact it would have on the ratepayers. Now, it's not designed. These figures are not designed to reflect an actual bridge or an actual location. So it's an indication to people, and I think with any of our big infrastructure items that we're considering, an indication of the economic impact needs to be given. So I'm completely comfortable with this figure. I just think it's an indication, and it's not intended to be a costed out specific bridge or a specific location.
Thank you, Jim. So we're moving on then to page 433, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38. I think we've done all this, haven't we? Right through to the end of that segment. I found some of these submissions quite interesting. In particular, some of the suggestions around different flows, traffic, largely by the trucking companies. So moving on then, right down to page 442. That brings to conclusion that section, and moving on then to the road safety, including speed limits. Page 443, 444, 445, 446, 447, 448. And I've moved past, sorry, that's speed's done. And we're up to technology then at 447, 448, 449, 450. Moving then into the transport access for rural communities. Page 451, 452, 453, 454, 455, 456. Nothing in that section. Excellent. Then the transport network. Roger.
Sorry, transport access to rural communities.
Correct. Oh, sorry. No. we finished that one and then whipped through the transport network for Cambridge. My mistake. I didn't see my heading as I was flicking. So that's at 453. Yes.
Could you press your button, please, Roger?
Sorry. There were a number of questions on the rural accessibility and the safety issue. And I just wonder if in our response to those rural submitters, we have a series of rural tours where we go out, and I'm just wondering whether we could use that vehicle to open up some communication with the rural community over that specific issue.
I'm not sure that that's required in terms of the responses, but it certainly would be topical when we do undertake our rural tours at the community board level to raise those issues. They're sort of more granular and detailed, but yeah, definitely something to address at that time. But I don't see that there needs to be any change in terms of these responses. But you're quite rightly, they are big issues in those rural communities. I know, I live there, but it's probably best dealt with in that rural community board tours. So thank you for your observations there, Roger. So then moving into the Transport Network Cambridge, 453, 454, 455, 456, and then onto the Transport Network Te Mutu at 457, 458, Transport Network General / Other, the big catch-all area, so that's 459, 460, 461, and then into the big general / other issues or responses rather at page 462, 463, 464, 465, 466, 467, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76. I believe that's the last one in terms of those responses. So have we addressed the general flavour of responses that people had without getting granular about things that you'd perhaps like staff to just zhuzh up a little bit or change, or significant issues that you think need to be addressed that somehow escaped us as we skipped through those pages? I think we've covered them all. Mayor Jim.
Fine, Madam Chair. It's just that we do want to make sure, and I know it's a summary document, we just have to make sure that people feel that they have been listened to and we've made an appropriate response back to them. So yeah, as long as the staff have got that on board, then more than comfortable.
Yeah,
To be honest, Mayor Jim, that's part of my concern.
Excuse me, Roger, that would be through me.
Yeah, sorry, through you, Madam Chair. That's part of my concern.
I'm quite confident, as is the group manager, that the responses are appropriate in the circumstances, and we have raised some issues here. And if there are any other larger issues, I think Andrew's raised his hand. Andrew.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. Look, I also agree that the responses are appropriate and congratulate the Kirsty and the team, Brian, on the work they've done on this. It's been a really major project, and I would wish to remove the recommendation on page 92, A through F.
Andrew, can I just interrupt there for a minute? I have Joe Greed waving frantically at me. I totally agree with your comments in terms of congratulating staff for the efforts in terms of these responses, but I think Joe has something she wishes to add.
Through the chair, we've just been working on an amended recommendation as a result of all the changes that you've been talking on. So I'll just make some final adjustments to that, and then we'll get that wording up on the screen so everybody's clear on what.
How long might that be, Joe? Is it worthwhile us taking a wee break, or?
It'll probably, by the time I'll just have to move something up and then get it on the screen. So that could take a couple of minutes.
Okay, a couple of minutes. Talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah, thanks for that, Joe. Yeah, I guess that's entirely appropriate. So I'll just reserve my moving for a few moments.
Just while we have this little bit of a break, I'd also like to echo those congratulations, because you can see that it has been a massive piece of work, and I'm really pleased with the shape of the strategy at the moment, and I also appreciate the effort that's gone into those responses, because I did think, you know, the vast majority of them were well detailed and, you know, reflected an acknowledgement of all those people that had submitted, and yeah, respect for the opinions that were expressed. That's also well done, everyone. I'm sure that, yeah, it's been a heap of work for you, but I think we can be proud of what we've got at the end of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. I think Kirsty wants to say a few words.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'd just like to thank the elected members for that feedback, but particularly want to acknowledge that this has been very much a collaborative team effort across the strategy and transportation teams, particularly led by Rachel Elgar, who was brought in specifically to deliver this piece of work, working closely with Brian and his team, but also to acknowledge those that have worked behind the scenes, EAs and our governance team particularly, and members of the strategy team in preparing what is quite a very hefty agenda item for you, together with the annual plan work. So I'd just like to thank everyone that has played a part. And at the end of the day, this is about delivering on our vision to build connected communities. So thank you for the role that you two played today.
Thank you, Kirsty.
Yeah, Susan,
Andrew and then Liz.
While we're waiting, I'm at the moment sitting in the city of Gatineau, which adjoins Ottawa in Canada. It's not one of their largest cities, and when I consider the emissions that are happening here from transport, what we can do in Waipa is not even a drop in the bucket. However, we have our commitments and we need to meet them. So, yeah.
Thanks for that real world check, Andrew. Liz.
Yeah, that is helpful actually, Andrew. I guess I'm just reflecting at the beginning of this term when we agreed as a council to provide more strategic leadership than ever before. And that was, you know, Kirsty, I remember your speech at the time very clearly. And, you know, with the district experiencing really, really high growth, this is a very appropriate, I guess, response, this strategy, to provide that really clear and, I suppose, sound leadership going forward as well. You know, this is going to really help shape our community, this piece of work, no question about it. And there's going to be some really big changes, you know, around the corner as well. But I'm exceptionally happy with the work that all the staff have done on this, and really, really wrapped with the number of submissions that we've had. We've got good engagement, and I think our community is also interested in what we're doing, which is very pleasing to see. So yeah, when the motion comes up, I'm happy to second Andrew's moving of it.
Jumped the gun a little, didn't he? Yeah, I recall that day too, Liz, that the strategy-led organisation speech, which was music, I guess, to my ears, and I'm pleased to say that this is definitely one of the larger pieces of work in that big puzzle, I suppose. And I have to also acknowledge the input from Peter and Mark this morning. I thought it was a really important contextual way of viewing what we're doing here in our district, because we can't do this alone, and we're not doing it in isolation to what is going on at a central government level and what our future holds. So look, I thought that was a really brilliant way of scene setting, Kirsty and team, and it really it made what we're doing actually make sense, I suppose. So many thanks for that.
Totally agree with that.
Where are we, Joe? I'll be having technical issues.
Bringing in the other experts.
Just as well we have an IT expert on council. For those of you that aren't here, Marcus is now executing his talents from his day job.
And now I'm assuming that we're going through page by page of the strategy.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, and then we're going to, oh, the numbers are the other numbers.
Oh, I got the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Joe, I was just wondering whether or not we had to add John Mills into the verbal submissions. That's all, because that you've got them listed there. Yeah.
I added it when we moved those initial recommendations at A and B.
Oh, okay.
And C, yeah, I threw him in at that, yeah, and B at the end there.
Okay.
So we're really only looking at
Oh, yeah, right. The changes to the staff.
yeah, the last ones.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm.
So are you able to see that, Zoomers online?
They can probably see it better than we can.
Okay, I don't mind reading it out unless, Joe, you'd like to. I can read it out if you want me to. Okay, so in terms of, we're kicking off with the changes appearing in recommendation D. The Strategic Planning and Policy Committee approves the staff recommendations on the submissions included in the submissions to the Transport Strategy with staff comments and recommendations document ECM 1018028020 attached as Appendix 2, subject to the following amendments. And then these are listed. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 changes. Submission point number 157, remove the wording no changes to the transport strategy from the recommendation. Submission point 171, a written response to be provided to the Pirongia Ward Committee verbal submission. Third one is staff advice at page 34 of the summary of submissions to be amended to incorporate the work done at on the parking study. Yeah. In Te Awamutu as well as Cambridge, and a specific response to be provided for the Te Awamutu Community Board in response to their submission on parking. The next one is submission point 154, a more detailed reason to be provided as to why a parking lot behind the event centre for business staff is not plausible. And then the next one is in relation to the responses on connection of our rural communities for staff to incorporate wording where appropriate to cover the work done by the Waikato Regional Council around potential future services such as total mobility and shuttle services for our rural communities. And then the last one is in relation to the responses in connection with rail, where appropriate, the work of the Waikato Regional Council to be highlighted as far as it has indicated that rail in our towns is not feasible to 2050. Rail to our towns is not feasible to 2050. And then paragraph E, is that changed? It is, isn't it? No, it hasn't been changed. It's just that one. Okay, E and F are as they appear in our agenda.
Sorry, should that be that rail service to our towns is not feasible?
Yeah, if you want to. Have you got that one there, Troy? Rail service?
She can't edit it on the screen.
Oh, okay.
But I've got the
parking study and excellent.
Yeah.
Perfect. Is everybody comfortable with those?
Very happy with those. Thanks,
excellent.
Susan.
So, Andrew, are you were still happy to move the new and improved recommendations?
Absolutely. Thank
excellent.
you.
And Liz, you jumped the gun and said you were happy to second. Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Can I have a point of clarification? Are we moving all of those recommendations, which includes the track changes to the strategy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So Andrew's put the motion, has said happy to move it. Liz is second. I'm putting the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Against?
Yes. And I'd like
would you want your opposition recorded?
Yes, please.
Okay. Councillor Gordon would like his opposition recorded. The Motion is put and one is successful. Well done, team. Congratulations. Thank you, Kirsty and Rachel. Really important piece of work for us. Right. Okay. I think we're probably best just to adjourn for a short time. The lunch actually isn't here till 12. Sorry, till 1 rather. Oh, it's here. Excellent. Well, that's very opportune. Excellent. Perfect timing. So if we just adjourn for our lunch break and return at 12:40, I believe, when the fees and charges hearing is due to commence with our only submitter, Sue Milner.